Welcome, David. Welcome, Fatima. Is it Fatima or Fatima?
That's
Hi, Erin.
Hey, family.
Hey.
hello.
Once you find your shoulders dropping and your speech gets slow and hazy, you'd better change your way of being before you found your brain got lazy. You can build a better future when you join the winning team. If you desire a bright tomorrow, you must build a brighter dream. Dare to let your dreams reach beyond you. Know that history holds more than it seems. We are here alive today because our ancestors dared to dream. From Africa, they lay in the bilge of slave ships and stood half naked on auction blocks. From Eastern Europe, they crowded in vessels overloaded with immigrants and were misnamed on Ellis Island. From South America and Mexico, from Asia, they labored in sweatshops. From all over the world, they came to America, many shivering in rags, and still they dared to dream. Let us dream for today and for tomorrow. Let us dare to dream, dream.
Welcome. Thank you all for being here.
Say, I am this man.
How are you all feeling?
Very well. It's great to be here.
I'm so glad. So I will definitely watch the doors and make sure that folks will come in okay. Um, and I would like to just formally welcome everyone to Black Star Alliance panel, part one, It Takes a Village. And we'll be talking about village schooling. Just a little bit of housekeeping. This is going to be recorded so that we can share it with people who may not have been able to make it today. If you are not on our mailing list and you would like to be on our mailing list, please make sure you send me your email. That would be in the chat box to marjan.babonkana, and we'll make sure that you're added to our gatherings. This kind of space happens every week, Wednesdays, 12 noon Pacific time, and to about 1:30. And we just set aside space to make sure we're talking about what is village schooling, how do we do it well, what has been Black Star Alliance approach, history, and what topics just emerge. So we welcome you to join every week, same number, same password. In case something changes, we'll make sure we have your email and send it out. So I'd like to share with you some of Black Star Alliance history and framework. Oh, about who we are. Oh, one too far. And Black Star Alliance started as a collection of parents in 2006 because we wanted to make sure our children got the best of us and the best homeschooling possible. So we came together, met in a bunch of different kinds of places, in people's homes. We met at community spaces, we met at parks, we met at people's organizational spaces, and we struggled to figure out what could we do collectively to make education a priority and then reframe education. And in that reframing of education, we've come through places of, it's definitely not sitting at the table with your child and trying to make them do some dittos and worksheets. is definitely not being the only adult working with your child. And it definitely is working in a village. It definitely is expanding what we call academic curricula to include emotional development, um, social development, intuitive development, and responsibility amongst the village. Um, Myself and Mike, could you wave? Has started working this and figuring out that, you know what we really do is we enroll adults, we enroll parents, we enroll caregivers into this process at Black Star Line. And in doing that, we're looking at adult education and how do we understand who we are as a child's first teacher to drive our children's education in the academic career until they can take it over for themselves and develop that capacity. Did I leave out anything, Maya?
No, the fact that we kind of along that slogan, we talk about that we are parent enrolled or driven, we are child focused, and we are African centered.
Indeed, Ashe. Yes. Um, and since that, we've expanded our team, expanded our family collective, and that's most of y'all here today. And special shout out to Erin. I know she's behind the wheels, but she's always behind the wheels of steel. So that's, she holds us down in the community as well. Candace, who is a long-term parent and her own homeschooling, village schooling parent in her own right. Adasha, who is of Modest Family Solutions, and David Bash, who also offers a whole new experience of village schooling that I myself have used, and actually I think most of us have used in a very similar way. And then welcoming Fatima. Did I say it right again?
Fatima. Yes, you did. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. To our conversation. On the screen, you'll see some of our demonstrations of what village schooling has looked like. And we strive to make sure it's child-centered, but adult-driven. In our process of developing, and most recently, Mother Mims, Dr. Maxine Mims, asked our team a question very poignantly. What would village schooling look like? And offering that we might want to shift our language from homeschooling to village schooling. And that has become you know what? That makes sense. Why are we fighting this animal around homeschooling? Because it's not what we do, it's not what we've done. Let's rename it so we don't have to keep explaining something that we don't do and making it something comprehensive to other people. So today's conversation is about what does village schooling look like, and some 3 leading questions into it. We will be having questions at the end for a little stick around time. We plan to end around 1:20ish, and then maybe for about another 8 minutes, we'll have some time to have questions. In the meantime, we're going to ask that participants keep their mics off. Please feel free to use the chat if you have urgent questions that you want to ask of the panelists or of myself. I will be facilitating the conversation, and our panelists will include Adasha Turner of Modest Family Solutions. You can, homeschooling style is this: I believe in spiritual grounding and unconditional social emotional guidance and providing differentiated instruction during an academic journey. And our other panelist is Mai Dalila, who says, I believe in wide exposure of activities, travel, people, and spending lots of time on areas of passion. I believe in applying a cultural and community context to everything, introducing mastery, challenges, and rigor to what we define as important subjects. And then we have Candace Hightower, which, oh my goodness, I apologize. Who, I don't know what happened to it. I don't think I refreshed. Says that she would say her homeschooling style is based off of her child's learning style. and needs more of an eclectic combination of what is considered standard schooling curriculum, but definitely add African and Indigenous centered and through a non-traditional educational lens. Did I get that right, Candace? Okay, so those are our 3 panels.
Yes.
Let me go back one more slide because I want to share the pathway in which we'll be taking this conversation. So today we are focusing on part 1 of a part 3 panel. Part 1 is focusing on the panelists' inspiration for them to village school their children and what assets they brought to this conversation of village schooling. And then we're going to end on what were their homeschooling glimmers. The next week, we're going to get into some of the nuts and bolts, if you will, about how did you all do homeschooling? How did you all set it up? What does that look like for village schooling? And then we want to know some of their mistakes. What had happened was, and then what they learned from their what had happened was, and how their children have manifested through the ideas of challenges, and maybe some people call them mistakes. We'll also look at what some of their barriers were and how they overcame those barriers. On the 3rd week, which will be on October 7th, is going to be much more of an interactive space around the resources that they use for village schooling. And the panelists may be added to as we go through. So just know you have some skilled folks coming to you. So for our panelists, I would like to ask you, what inspired each of you to village school your child or children? And could you give us some information about what motivated you and how many children you have and what that process was like?
Hi, Adasha here. What motivated me was my grandmother. We were raised partially out in the out in the desert of Barstow, California, and she had 13 children and not a lot to go off of as far as educational resources. So we developed life skills, you know, how to cook, how to clean, how to take care of ourselves. And it was something that grounded all of us in a sense of who we are and what we can contribute, you know, to each other growing up. So when we went into an academic environment, we had a strong sense of self and directing where we wanted to go and what we wanted to do. So.
Thank you.
For myself, what inspired me to village school my child was them. They were unhappy with, and I could see that the unhappiness that they had going to a traditional school was having an effect on them at home and who they were as a person. And so I just decided that I was gonna, even though I was scared, I was going to do what was best for her and figure it out. And so I decided to homeschool so that just because I myself went to public school and I knew how she felt. And I didn't want that for her because it took me a long time to rebuild my own self-confidence to know I was smart. And so I just didn't want that for her. And so that's what motivated me to go ahead and start homeschooling her.
Okay. Thank you. Maya.
Well, I love the word inspired because I think deep down the inspiration was my father. I oftentimes speak about the things he told me 2 weeks before he died, like days before he died, the instructions he gave me, which were pretty practical. And I speak about instructions he gave me as it pertains to my car and keeping up with it. But one of the things he told me, and Olu was a toddler at the time, is that, and a very, like many of our children, very busy toddler, very, wanting it his own way, and as toddlers should be, and exploring. And as Olu was toddling around his the room where my dad was convalescing, he says to me, I know you want to make him mind, but please don't break his spirit. And mind is, old school for, behave, right? And that really stuck with me. And it really is something that I, work with in many areas, but for sure as it pertains to his education. And so in making the choice to homeschool, village school really, thinking about places that would not break his spirit, placing him in places that and in situations that would support him, support his essence with love, but also challenge him and help build his character, and because in a way that was honest and true. And my understanding of dominant culture education is that it's foundationally very racist. Even though there are good people in it, it was built on institutionalized racism, and it still exists. And by their own evidence and data, they don't do well with Black children. And it just would seem nonsensical to roll the dice. Believe in still working because a lot of our babies that I did not birth are in that system, but definitely was inspired to do something else, do something different. Because my hope is that he would be a better version of himself. I didn't want to put him in a system that on the other end, I didn't even recognize him anymore for the worst. So, thank you for the question.
Thank you. Do you all feel that racism and your child being Black had a significant impact, like my aid in the village school?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. We were from Orange County, California. And so my parents, they did a lot to achieve, the American dream, making sure that we had everything, making sure we were in the best schools. But what they didn't understand is us being Black in an all-white school, it was very hard. We weren't able to connect with anyone. We were always, fighting our own battles that no one really recognized. And our parents didn't, understand, and we didn't want to seem ungrateful, for the life that we were being given, monetarily wise. But, when it came to connecting with community, it just wasn't there. So when I would be at home in Orange County versus being out in the desert with, with my village, with my grandmother, with my aunts, just having that connection, that's what, like I said, that's where the confidence came from. It wasn't from being, in the best, schools. It came from, connection with, your people. And so that's something that I've longed for, during my 15 years of traveling. It's something that my kids have wanted, during our 15 years of traveling is, finding our village and seeking that out. So it was definitely a driving factor, being Black and that connection.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I'd have to agree. For myself, when I grew up, just like you, my grandmother, we had a village, it was church, but we still had a village of people there. And the men and women that my grandparents had me around, they loved me and cared about me. And I wasn't seeing that with my child when she was going to school. Those teachers that are around, they were there to teach her. They didn't care about her. And I needed her to have that. I needed her to have what I had growing up. And because I'm not a religious person, I had to go and look for our people, our community, our village, and then that's a part of homeschooling that has been a part of my journey is having to be more out there and putting myself out there to have those people in my life so that they can also be in my children's life too. That journey has been something that I have also had happened to me while being a homeschool has helped me grow and as well in getting that for them. making sure they have what they need.
That's helpful.
Mhm.
And it sounds like, and I know you all said this in your intro statements, wow, in your style of homeschooling, but you're elevating the character, the spiritual development over the can my child add 1+1?
Yes.
I hear that correctly as part of your
Mhm.
motivating factor?
One of my learnings, I think that was just, it's been fascinating to watch, is that when that foundational piece is there,
Yes.
I mean, it's crazy. If you had told me that, because I'm not a teacher per se, right? If you had told me I'd be homeschooling before I had a kid, or I just wanted to have a baby, right? And so, I would have said like, wow, no. But what I'm amazed at is what they're able to do and pick up and learn when foundationally things are square, when they feel good about themselves, when they are in spaces that they are held with love, and there are high expectations of how they show up. All of that. I think that homeschooling and village schooling sometimes gets a bad rep for being this place where like, oh, whatever. And it don't be like that, because you at home, eyes are on them all the time.
Mhm.
And so yeah, it's fascinating to watch the growth and what they do learn.
I would like to add to that, May. I think that when that foundation's there, it's easier for your child to make those mistakes. They don't feel like they're going to be reprimanded as much as they would a teacher who has no connection with them, versus, a mother's unconditional love to be like to redirect them. And so that's what our kids need in their development. And that's what's missing. And the difference between traditional schooling, even homeschooling, if you're trying to push someone else's rigor onto your child that you don't really connect with, they're going to pick up on that. And our kids pick up on nonverbal before any kind of verbal instruction. So if love is where you're coming from, they pick that up, and that's part of their foundation, and they're able to do everything else based off of love.
That's perfect. That's something that actually when we were meeting in parks, one of the mamas who had a gazillion children,
Right.
told you what you can do with homeschooling on your worst day out of love will fall so far short and will pale in comparison to what that institution will do on their best day.
It's true. I'll live and die by that. On the real, I'll live and die.
So it makes me wonder, what did you all see as your assets as you started this journey? We got love, right?
Patience.
Patience. Okay. Okay. What else do you feel like you brought to your village schooling experience?
I would say understanding. I had my children young, and I did not go through, I didn't finish traditional schooling, but because of my confidence, I was able to pick up and be very successful in my career. So I did not go to high school, and I did not go to college. I ended up challenging a lot of my boards as a clinical neurophysiologist. I did not need a lot of that traditional academic in order to be successful. And that's what I wanted my children to see. My daughter was my secretary for my business. We ran an OR operations company for 15 years. And she started aeronautical engineering program when she was 13, fresh out of 8th grade, and by challenging the board and challenging the district on what she knew and her confidence. So that when they saw that in me, I was able to not only understand it, but reciprocate it with my children. And it made them successful. And even though they've tried several different careers, they were able to do that and know that it's okay. You know what I mean? You don't have to have this cookie cut platform all the time and just follow that one route. If you want to pivot and change your mind, that's your business. You can do that, and know it's your life to lead. And being an example, they can look up to me and see like, okay, my mom did this. We didn't struggle. And even though we moved, we literally traveled. We were traveling for 15 years. We didn't have that broken homeness because we had each other. So it was something that, my kids, they carry on throughout this day. So I'm glad that I was able to bring that into my village schooling, experience, and they're able to share that with other people and inspire them to village school or unschool, just break from the traditional norms. They were not made for us.
I appreciate how you talk about it that way, because we often talk about generational trauma and generational harm, generational curses. And what I hear you saying is that your strength, your asset was also a generational courage. You talked about your parents, you know, going out there and getting it done. And then you talked about your grandmother instilling in you a sense of courage. And I'm hearing you pass it on to your children. So I appreciate you talking about it from a way that makes a shift from the deficit conversation about what we're always bringing, you know, a little bit less, or what we have to claw through and
always compensating. Yes.
Yeah. And knowing that that's not everybody's frame of reference too, right? Yeah. What strengths did you all know you all had, or you might have found out that you knew you had it after you started?
Well, I'll go, but I still was titillated by this patience piece that Candace speaks of, because whenever you talk to homeschool parents, that's what they say. I don't have enough patience. And I think, well, neither do I, but that didn't. So I want to know, how did that look for you, Candace? I'm curious.
Well, that I always say that's one of my gifts. I am patient. I don't, you know, I let people do what they need to do to get to where they're going. You know, I don't rush people. You know, I'm just not like that, because everybody has to process things differently. And I understand that, because I have a learning disability. So that's why it comes to where I'm patient with people. So I know how you guys have been with your kids, and you're like, we went over this like 5 times. And you get tired of them. You really do. How many times we got to do this one problem? You know, so I feel like when I knew that if I was a homeschool, I would be patient. I knew that part. I knew that I wouldn't be on them, you know, like, you're not doing this, you're not doing this. I knew I would be able to give them that. I just, because I come from educators, and my grandmother was a teacher, and she was from the South. So that's all I have to say about that. I think you guys know where that goes. To say they don't play. So I just knew that in order for her to become who she is, you know, help her be that person, I couldn't rush her into it, or rush her, and that's in her, in everything, and how she learns and processes stuff and everything. Yeah.
I'm so feeling that you're talking about a skill set that is an ongoing development, and that it comes from a place of what you know about yourself to be true. Right? What I know is that I had this situation here. It didn't define me, and that's all of who I am. Yet it gave me a level of compassion on how I want to engage with my children.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think with that also is time. Like, if they're not getting it right then and there, it may not be the time for it, you know, and to be able to just, you know, let it be, nurture what's really the underlying issue, even having the time to find out what the underlying issue is. Maybe they're tired, maybe, you know, they have a headache, or they're just not feeling it today, and being able to pick that up, knowing that schooling is not confined to the 8 to 5. Schooling or the process of learning, you know, is when they're able to receive it. And as a mother, you can pick up on that. And that could be, you know, 7 days a week, anywhere, in the car, in the, you know, outside of that tradition.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I think that.
Oh, yeah. I've made lessons. I'm like, oh, we're in the car, and I'll just see something. Oh, this is lesson time. They get on, I guess it gets on their nerves, but you know, hey.
There's a joke about homeschool kids and summer school. Like, did they get a summer break? Summer break?
That's the best time.
That's ramping it up time.
Yeah, that's ramping it up time. It's like,
but so they said, Dora Explorer has nothing on you, Mom. We are always out.
But I think that what I was able to bring was a level of certitude and conviction that to the fact that this is what we're doing because it's the right thing to do. and it was fuel. So I think the other piece is that I brought a level of energy. Um, and and I say that particularly because I'm an older mom, right? So by the time I had my son, I had friends who had grandkids older than my son, right?
Mhm.
So I had to go make a whole bunch of new friends. They had little kids.
About to have their own children.
Find
So
them on the street.
yeah.
I would see them with their little baby, and I go, "Hi, my name is. Will you be our friend?" And, after when your kids is older, you'd be like deuces, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so certitude and a level of energy, like, and I appreciate, I appreciated that. I appreciated the journey. So loved it. Loved the journey of it.
Okay, I'm also just jumping here because I think another one of my assets is knowing how to make friends and be in friendships.
Mm-hmm.
That's my friend thing.
I agree.
He knows how to pull people together. That is definitely like a superpower.
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
Like that. Now I'm like,
Definitely can relate. I have a 25 and a 22 and a 6-year-old.
oh,
So once I finished homeschooling my oldest, all my friends were like, woo. And then when I had my daughter, they're like, that was so much fun. You wanted to do it again, right? You're on your own. We're not going through that journey with you again. So it's been very interesting finding a new village. And that's the thing is, being able to reinvent yourself, and connect on a different level and be deeper with it this time.
Girl, we need to write that book, because that's a good one. People underestimate that.
That's my homeschooling started just by, I was at school and there was other parents, Black parents who were unhappy with the school, and we started to talk. We, come from different places in life, and we start talking about it, and we just started to figure out how we were going to get together and homeschool our kids. A lot of people dropped off, but a couple of us were serious, and those are the ones who ended up, getting together and helping each other out, because we all came from different places of expertise and what we could provide the kids. We pulled our resources together, and I didn't know these people before I decided to homeschool. So, it just happened.
And I think when your kids see you trusting other people, like if this is not your area of expertise and this is not your subject, that you actually have friends that aren't foreign, you know what I mean? So it's like you're able to rely on them, and they see that building, they see how those relationships work, where I appreciate that now that I'm, I've bought a home, I'm here in Washington versus where I was before I was traveling. So I didn't really have to bank so much on those connections, but I see that now, how having it instilled and having a constant set of, people that we can rely on, it makes it easier for you. So you could have that respite. You have those, those days off to where it's like, you feel comfortable enough, with a group of ladies or a group of, with family, that you can kind of offset that on. And that's nice, because when you're homeschooling, especially now, I just see a lot of moms about to break down in front of their kids. And it's like, oh, and that's so discouraging, because you have it, we have to rest as well. Yes. So the village is so important when it comes to that.
It's really rich. I'm kind of stuck because I don't even know where to go from there. I could just sit in that space about why it's so important to know how to make a friend. Like, so much comes from that, that skill set, and what it teaches children, what it teaches ourselves about ourselves, and what we can do with that information. And I think it also speaks very clearly as to why, from Black Star Alliance perspective, why we say you don't do that by yourself. Because we do respect and honor and hold up high the importance of having a well, healthy, and fully functioning adult caregivers. Yeah. Wow. That's fascinating. Okay. Are there any other skills that you feel like you brought? Not just, internal characteristics, any skills you feel like you might have brought to this conversation?
I think openness. This time I'm not as rigid with my little one, and having her being the curriculum. We're all over the place, and it's okay, So I think having that openness and being able to grow and letting them see that you're on that journey with them. It's not always authoritarian, you know, type of approach towards education. It's kind of like, we're in this together and I'm a guide, you know, rely on me, rely on each other, you know. The intuition, the curiosity comes from your child. You know, you're the safeguard to make sure that they're not going to break their neck doing that. But you know, but having fun, you know, with your child and that connection, I think, and being open to it, to where we, you know, I make mistakes too. I don't feel well that, you know, that day either. Let's do something, you know, different.
Mm-hmm.
That maybe the skills that I have, I've done some work to try to be clear as it pertains having an anti-racist analysis and understanding who I am as a cultural being, as a Black woman, as a woman of African descent, and the importance of ethnic identity development. And so really work to try to bring that. What's always a kicker or funny about kids is that you put this out there as a level of belief system or a way of being and walking through the world, and they then need to take it and do what they will with it. And so I think about, I did come from parents who really were real clear about who they were as Black folks in this country. Did they see themselves necessarily as African-centered? Maybe not. So when I changed my name to an African name, that was different than what, you know, they would have done. And so it's interesting watching my son. He wears his Blackness differently than I do, right? And it's interesting to watch the development of it and to appreciate it, right? Because I wore my Blackness differently than how my parents did. And what I would say is all of us do. All of us do is that. And so trying to support that and deepen it, and hopefully helping him to be clearer about how he walks in this world as a Black male. Because, you know, I don't even need to tell people on this call, like, what's up with that? And it's not just a Black male, it's Black female. But I was just speaking about, you know, my journey. And so being able to have those conversations with him is a skill. I did a lot of HIV/AIDS work in my past and had lots of hard conversations around disease and transmission and sex and sexuality. So being able to have those kinds of conversations, and village schooling or homeschooling makes it so that it's not so contrived. Since we're together a lot, when things come up, you can just address it because you ain't trying to, well, you sometimes have to run to things, but you just can integrate it into your life better.
A little more organic.
Right,
Yes.
right. A little bit more organic. And so being able to do that, and not just on those subjects about death and dying, about all those, you know, about, you know, my values and how his values might be different, are different than mine. And, you know, being able to do that, because that's very important. You know, those are very important. And so, yeah, I think I was able to have courageous conversations with him around that to a certain extent. Some things I kind of wish, TMI, I don't want to talk about it, but I'm working on it. That's why I go to workshops and read.
Right.
I ain't ready. I'm not ready.
Try to pick up some additional skills, but you know.
And you speak to the part about just being a constant learner, you know, constantly engaging in it, and a level of openness. I think somebody said earlier before, as part of the things that they bring to the conversation with village schooling is being open. You know, I'm also hearing not being rigid, you know, allowing for emergent curriculum, you know, something, you're in the car and something comes up, it's like, look, there's an opportunity. So it sounds like just training yourself, if it's not already there, to be able to see what the opportunities are so you can capitalize on it, because it's all learning. It's all the important, good, juicy stuff. It's the stuff that when children exit out of traditional schools, they're looking at a different level of, they're looking at different metrics. They're looking at different things. Can they perform this skill? Can they perform that skill? Where do they rank at this, right? And we find out that a lot of those young adults who exit do not know how to be compassionate, do not understand how to deal with grief, hardship, mistakes, having hard conversations, and all of those things are fuel for developing a healthy, well-rounded human being.
And to be in the future workforce or in entrepreneurship, whatever, in the future, you have to have those skills. And you can have the smartest child in the world, but if they don't have the skill set to communicate and to talk to people, negotiate, just regular things that your child who's homeschooled sees you do every day while they're with you. Children are stunted sometimes when they're at school, because at a school and traditional, because they have to wait and to get those skills because they're not being taught them, and then they're too far behind to even catch up to where current jobs and future jobs need what the needs are. And so I had a professor tell me that the kids that come into college who are homeschooled are just way better prepared for life. Period. So that's definitely.
I think homeschooling, you're more connected to life. And as a parent, you're able to, like Mayat was saying, you're able to make those connections in that aha moment. So being a spiritual person, you can, connect what they're doing to, the fundamental, essence of humanity. They don't teach that in school. So that's something and it's very hard to learn. And when, as a parent and as an educator, you can break that down to them in that moment to a point where they fully understand. They're embracing what's going on. It's encompassing them, all around, so where it's not so foreign to be connected, to each other.
That in the moment, I have great appreciation for my son. I think he's a great guy, not an easy person. And I really think I felt that if I hadn't been able to course correct sooner some things, like if, whole school days, whole weeks, whole months, I've heard, stories of that, of a particular behavior happening, and before it could be caught, or before a village member could catch it, so that then we could work with it. I really think that we would have had more trouble. Definitely not perfect, but I think it was really helpful to have hands-on as well. So.
I think as our children, they develop, their personalities develop, their appreciation, it either decreases or increases. So when you're able to be kind of there through those transitions, it makes life a lot easier for them, where they're not isolated and by themselves. So it builds up that social emotional component to it. In order to navigate academia, you definitely need that. You can't just throw books at your child and expect for them to absorb, what's going on, and disconnecting that social emotional component to it, or spiritual component to it. Like all of that is necessary to, give your child that environment to grow, instead of, like Marjan was saying, like they're not clay. We're not going to just mold them into what we want. They need that environment to grow.
I think the ability to see how they change as how they transform and grow is really interesting to hear y'all talk about. It's just about spending time with them to be steeped in life, and how they change and grow. Being able to see what that looks like on the other side, right? In traditional schools, you do assessments that I just don't like. They're the multiple choice questions, they're the short answer questions, the test, right? And it tells you a little bit of something, but doesn't tell you a complete picture about what they know. Right?
They can remember stuff. Yeah.
They can remember stuff and they get penalized for it, right?
Yeah.
Right. So with village schooling, I'm hearing you all talk about spending time with your children and the assets that you bring to it. I'm wondering about what were some of the glimmers? Like, what did you all see as you all are working with them that we may otherwise miss? Like, we may not see it on a test. We may not see it in the multiple choice, A, B, C, or D. But what were some of the glimmers that you all experienced with village schooling?
I know one of the things that really pushed me over to village schooling is when my son was in a homeschooling program, K-12, when it first started. I was busy running around in the hospitals. And so to motivate my children, I said the first person who gets to the end of this subject or finishes their courses gets $500. Overnight, my son had mastered and got A's on all of his tests. And they thought that was great. And I'm looking at him like, I know you did not do that work. I knew that he was able to manipulate the system. He was good at computer programming. He went in there, he earned his $500 and argued, that he deserved it so, which he did. But I knew that my son was capable of doing a lot more than these tests, even though they praised him and put him to the next grade. I knew I needed to challenge him a little bit more. So, understanding that, I was able to put him, eventually into an MIT Junior Achievers program for robotics engineering, electrical engineering, and programming. But if I would have just been happy with him getting A's, straight A's, through K-12 and graduating to the next, then I would have never, he would have never been tested. His potential would have never been tested. He would have just been at the end of the day, a mediocre kid, that wasn't his potential. So those were some of the glimmers.
He wouldn't have been a mediocre kid. He would have been in the behavioral classes because he would have been bored.
Right.
And challenging the teachers and obstinate. What do they call that?
OCD. Yeah. Obstinate deficient defiant disorder. Yeah. They labeled him as that. Yeah. That's how I know. And I said that, I'm like, yeah, he's a gentle soul. That's not his, but he was definitely bored. And so finding those things to challenge him and what actually he wanted to do. And he started at a magnet program that was in a public school. So we entered in briefly for him to attend the magnet program. And the only class, because he was so advanced, the only class that he had to take was the PE requirement, and it's like he was failing PE because he didn't want to dress out, and it's like, come on now, you're in a magnet program, but you're failing PE. How does that work? And it's like, he just wasn't interested in what the system had, that algorithm and just that status quo, program, for him, that wasn't his thing. And so, I mean, like I said, my daughter started aeronautical engineering when she was 13. They were, extremely bored. So starting college early for them, and giving them that access to, more challenging courses. This was before a lot of the AP started there. A lot of the dual enrollment started. So to actually see more children involved in that is great, but still they're lacking the guidance, and the parents don't have, people to go to kind of encourage that, instead of like, we don't know, because they don't, the education system they're learning as well. Things are being redefined and developed all the time. Your child's sitting there suffering, because they're not being engaged, and it's a true suffer.
And it's unnecessary. And it explains clearly the prison pipeline. Thank you. What other glimmers have you all experienced because of village schooling?
Well, I'll share my glimmer with my daughter was the way she started to become more responsible for her education once we were homeschooling. That made me happy because you don't want to constantly tell them you need to do this. She started just to take on the responsibility that this is my education, because I kept telling her that. So she finally got it that, this is my education. And so I need to be participating in what that looks like. And so that was my glimmer, where I was like, okay, she's getting it. She's starting to really get this. And I didn't make a mistake snatching her, out of school.
Right.
it just made me feel better that she was on, you know, she also understood what all this was, me doing, by doing all that, what it meant. And she took on responsibility too. So that was a big glimmer for me.
I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Became intrinsic, like this is mine. And I could definitely get in her.
Mm-hmm.
She's a go-getter. She's very
Yeah.
clear about, you know, what she wants, what she's thinking. And even if it's, you know, doesn't pan out the way that she's thinking it will,
Mm-hmm.
it's so much better that she tried and gave it a good go and she course corrects.
Yes.
She's still successful. So I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And and I tell them all the time, hey, we don't make mistakes. These are lessons, because you'll learn from it and you'll move, make different moves next time. So don't stay there, you know? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I like that. That's a good quote.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Oh, the glimmers. Yeah. I think that one of the glimmers has been just on a personal tip, being reaffirmed of the brilliance of our village. That in our village, we have expertise all over the place. We have people who are passionate around ceramics, math, science, running, jewelry making, dance, like everything. You can literally create an incredible dynamic curriculum just going from one passionate, you know, adult or group that has been developed by Black folks to another. And that experience in our area is invaluable. It's one in which I carry a lot of pride around the area that we're from. You know, people are just doing incredible things. And so I think that that's one glimmer.
No.
I don't know who he would have been if we hadn't homeschooled, but I do appreciate that, you know, when I talked about the spirit thing, you know, sometimes it's gotten hard. I'll tell you, sometimes it's gotten hard, and I've raised my voice a couple of times, one or two. And and just when I'm thinking, oh my God, I've probably crushed this kid, like he comes back like swinging, or like, you know, not literally, of course, else he wouldn't be
Right.
around.
Otherwise you wouldn't be here.
But like he's got a zinger, or he's like, you know, and he's got a spark, right? Which as a mom, as you guys can imagine, as parents, that does your heart and soul good, because we want them to be fighters. We want them to be people that, even with the folks that care about them, you know, can stand on their own 2 feet, you know, and that kind of stuff. And you know, he is a person that is emotional and shows his emotions and feels deeply. I'm not saying other people don't. And so I didn't want that broken, and I feel it's not broken. I feel it's not broken, and I feel like you know, he's gonna be all right. He's gonna be all right. Again, there'll be lessons, as Candace says. My hope is that there's enough inside of him that he'll know how to pick himself up, dust himself off, and keep it moving. I'm hoping that there's enough of a moral compass, you know, and that there were enough examples in our community, and he had access to them, not just on the weekends, to what folks are doing. And I think that those are the glimmers. Definitely low is like, you know, what he can do. You know, that's a perk. So yeah, and I am so grateful for the journey. If I had to do it over again, I would do it. I would homeschool again. Like a doctor, but not quite like a doctor did it. Like
20 years, I don't know. Don't wait 20 years.
Within the realms of,
But that's another reason why Village is really awesome right now, is because Yeah, I'm not having any more. And my daughter's able to connect. When you say like-minded individuals, you know what I mean? It's important because that's one thing. Homeschoolers and village schoolers, they could recognize each other. You know, they have that self-determination. They're able to get out there and, you know, and get it, you know, to where, and not having to explain, because it's something that's ingrained in them that they have to be responsible for themselves and their village. You know what I mean? So when she's able to connect with other kids, that's you know what's nice. She's holding her own Zoom, you know, meetings and conferences because she sees, you know, her mom doing it, she sees her aunties doing it. So it's nice to have that connection.
I appreciate you using that example because I did want to ask you all to think about a concrete example of what the glimmer looks like. So you talking about the Zoom piece. You did give an example earlier on about your daughter being the secretary for your business.
Yes.
What that looks like. Because sometimes when we're doing village schooling or non-traditional stuff, we don't know what that looks like. We can feel it. We may not be able to even articulate it, but we know that there's something going on. There's something that has shifted. There's something that is beautiful about this experience. So we want to make sure we can articulate to people who are like, well,
Right.
can't they do that by going to a, you know, a park or a jamboree or something, right? So what is the thing? And I'm gonna help out a little bit because I'm thinking about my aide and this perseverance, right? What she has not shared is her son is both of them are artists. And I've experienced one having to perform a monologue, right? And prepare for auditions, even for the school. And what he did to prepare for it, the standard he set for himself. So if I'm gonna calculate, there's time management, there's setting a standard, there is planning for the objective. The other one will travel by himself through the airport, in which I had like a 20-something-year-old like, call me on the phone. He was what, 12, maybe 12 or 11. And he was able to navigate through the airport through himself and be attentive, be able to read body language and safely navigate from one state to another. Right? That's a lot of skill set. And there's a lot more that I'm not mentioning. But in the interest of time, that's what I'm talking about in terms of like those are real measurable glimmers that get lost when we talk about village schooling. Yeah.
And you're right. I think that people, I mean, we're not and definitely not in the business of convincing people to homeschool or village school, but to be able to talk about the tangibles is what people do ask us for. Thank you for that.
Make it visible, right?
Yeah, visible. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've come to our time. I want to give you a chance to say, are there any last words you all want to share out?
Don't be scared.
You've already been doing it. You taught your children the hardest things, you know, that they would ever do. Walk, talk, you know, how to use the restroom. You know what I mean? We've had the patience, we've shown compassion. Don't be so quick to hand that over to someone else because it's not going to be the same. You know, this is the time. Especially now. Especially now. This is the time.
It is. And if you think about it, you get more control over what they get, you know, of how, you know, what's the word I want to use? The quality that they get. You're in charge of that. You know, you have more control over that quality of what they get. Because there's some things that the schools teach. I'm like, So you get more quality, you know. If you spend more, you get to spend more time with your kids. You get to know them, really get to know them. Because I know when my kids were in school,
you do.
You work and they come home, you feed them. Did you do your homework? Go to bed. You just go, you know, and you just get more time. You get a deeper relationship, I feel like, with my kids now.
I would agree with all of that. And I know you always hear these things. People are talking about a different subject and they say, well, if I could do it, anyone do it. I mean, honestly, in my previous life, people that knew me, if they would have guessed, like, out of these 100 people, who was the last person that would be homeschooling, I'd be that last person on the real. Like, there were some people in our collective is that's what they always wanted to do. Or like Marjan, she came out, Marjan came out teaching. She was a little girl with like pencil and sit here and she teaching other little kids. Right, playing schools, all that stuff. Some of us was not doing that. And so I'll tell you, it's one of those doables.
Mhm.
One of those doables. And yeah.
Appreciate that. And I just want to remind everybody that we are going to be continuing these conversations. Next week is going to be September 30th, and we're going to have our second group of panelists explore questions around how do they do village schooling, some of the nuts and bolts and techniques that they use. They'll be talking about mistakes, right? And they'll talking about barriers. And then they'll talk about what are the benefits and how they came out on the other side. Looking forward to them getting into the nitty gritty, because when people talk about village schooling, I know in my experience and some of the people's experiences, well, what if you mess them up? So we'll be talking about that next Wednesday. It'll be the same number. It'll be the same login, provided we have no challenges with, today's, like the bombing stuff, or, nothing adverse happens. We'll be in the same space, same login. And I want to give a formal closeout, but just know that we have some hangout time as well. If you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. And if you're not on our mailing list, please make sure you put your email to either myself or Aaron. And then want to do, again, the formal closeout.
Oh, one moment before you do the closeout.
Nope, with two things, yep. Adasha has a survey that she put in the chat to help facilitate next week's conversation. Did you want to give a few sentences to that, sis?
Yes. So as we're venturing onto homeschooling and village schooling, it's very important to understand that your child has a learning style. We wanted to introduce those learning styles with the surveys that are typically given to your child. As we venture on this village schooling path, you'll understand and see the differences in our method versus traditional schooling methods. In addition to your child's learning style, we have a teacher or a parent teaching style. So you have several options when you're coming into homeschooling, unschooling, village schooling. And so this is giving you a preference on what you're leaning towards, when you're looking, towards homeschooling your child. And also know that you can change that at any time. Don't understand that you don't have to be locked into that. So go ahead and take the survey. We'll talk more about that when we come back next week. Thank you.
Thank you. And so as we like to formally close out by wishing well, sending metta to ourselves and to each other and to others in the world, because it is our intention that we are well and that we dwell in safety, that may all beings be healthy and happy, that may all beings be free from fear and pain, and may all beings be at peace. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll be here for about another 10 to 11 minutes. You like that? 10 to 11?
10 to 11-ish.
There were a few questions in the chats. Did you see those, Marjan? I think there was a few.
Yeah. No, could you read them?
Okay, let me find. I thought I saw.
We do have a few moments. If you want to, feel free to unmic yourself. And then that signifies that you're ready to chat. And then I could just let the room know that you're ready to talk.
I think that there were some conversations from Makeda around groups that for children that meet and talk about current events. And that's a resource question. I know we're talking about that, but
And it's Makeda.
Makeda, thank you.
I'm sorry, my house is very loud right now, and I was trying to communicate through the chat so it wouldn't be disturbing, but I'd be happy to hang out afterwards. I don't want to hold anybody up.
Yeah, I think that's the sound of a lot of learning.
Yeah.
We love on that.
Yes. There are rules that each people have and that we collectively have put together. And there are a few folks who we're talking about coming on who are resourcers for the third panel. So I don't know. It's like, I don't know if I want to tip our hand quite yet, Makeda.
Stay tuned.
I understand. I'm just eager. I'm excited.
Stay tuned. Yes.
I have a question. This is Foxy. I have a question.
Hey, Foxy.
First, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize today is Wednesday.
Mommy brains. That's you in the right spot.
That's how it is. But we're still live, huh? We're still recording this?
Yes.
Okay. So my question, I'm so inspired by this desire to come away from the grid, basically, I mean, the education grid, whatever you want to call that, and kind of pave your own way. My background is a formal teacher. My husband was a formal teacher. So we struggle so much to believe that we can just chuck it all out, right? I'm wondering for families who started this journey, my son now is in high school, and this is when I'm before high school, I'm just like, let's just figure this out. And now you get to high school and it's very serious about like what he needs to graduate, conversations with the school. We're still homeschooled, but he takes some schooling, some classes through online. I'm just wondering, can you talk about that tension that you may have? Did you experience this tension as you homeschooled about, are they getting all the credits they needed? And how did you wrestle through that?
Let me go first. Because BSL definitely put the declarative about how are we going to play the game? We recognize that this is the game. Mm-hmm. So we might choose to pull the game Candyland, Monopoly, right? What are the rules and what are we willing to do to play that game? Because we don't believe that every child needs to graduate from a high school. There's so many ways to matriculate, right? And it really depends on who the child is, what supports they need, and what they came in this world to do. And how do we feed that thing? Because as you, and I'm a alley-oop to Adasha in a minute. As you heard Adasha talk about not only her own experience, but that those of her children, there are so many different pathways to take, so many different opportunities, but sometimes our conditioning limits us to what we can do by what we think we have to do.
Yeah. Did you struggle with that yourself, Marjan? At one point, did you struggle, or did you just did that come easy for you?
I did not struggle. Let me be more complete. There was a place where I struggled, but it was less around this particular child's matriculation through school. It was more around their mental wellness and their health matriculation and their capacity. Mm-hmm. And then what I needed as a parent, because we're both in precarious situations. And that's where the village actually came in to help support that development.
Nice.
Yeah. So, and honestly, it was kind of weird because I ran into one of the people. I'm gonna start using names. Laura at Trader Joe's the other day. And I was like, how you doing? And we were catching up. And it was one of those opportunities where I said, if it hadn't been for people like you and Willis holding this child through that formalized education, because I needed to have my child at Garfield High School because I was dealing with some capacity issues, right? She didn't necessarily want to be there, and it wasn't necessarily good for her. It wasn't necessarily the best move. But because she had people like, you know, My Gate and SIP and, you know, other lords, that she was able to stay in that space enough to know, yeah, I'm done. This is not what I'm going to do. Let me just go do the junior college, the community college over here. Let me do organizing work over here and save myself. Right. So it was less around sitting in Mr. Willis's office trying to figure out how do we get these PE credits. Well, the waiver didn't come through, but she was in violin. Right. Well, it didn't count because you missed the deadline. Right. So there was struggle there, but it was less around those metrics and more around her wellness.
Got it.
Capacity.
And
focusing on what she wanted and needed to do for herself.
And three different kids, 3 different paths.
Yeah.
That's the other piece that I learned from Marjan, right? Like it wasn't cook. Everybody is not going to do it the same way based on who they are and what they need.
Yeah. So we chose to not play that game that way. And even with my youngest one, we're evaluating, well, do we want to play this game this way? We can put this game back on the shelf and get another one.
Nice. And knowing that those options are the key. I think that's where the anxiety comes from and the frustration comes from, is not knowing what your options are. So once you're exposed to those options and then you sit down with your child, looking at them as an individual, that this is a young adult making decisions for themselves. Is it my intentions, or, you know, what I want for my child is what they want? Really weighing those out, because you're going to have to empower them at some point to make their education, you know, about them and what they want, and then expose them to those pathways as well.
Yeah. And I'm, you know, I've been in the conventional spaces of being a teacher, you know, the public school system. I mean, public school system. You know, and I respect people who are there because they do hold our children who don't have options, and I definitely had to use it, and I needed them there. I needed them there.
Yeah. Thanks everyone.
I know that we homeschooled up until high school, and if I'm half hippie, so as far as I'm concerned, you know, we could have been done with this for a minute, GED'd it out, and let's get it going, right? That's not who he is, right? So, and it was clear relatively early that he's not a homeschooler. He's not an unschooler. Right? There's certain competencies he needs to have for his own mental and emotional wellness, and self, what he thinks about himself, and that he would want to enter into a setting. We did find a setting that fit his passion. I think that made a big difference. So coming to an art school as an option. And one of the things that Dasha talked about is them being around homeschool kids. What I found in this particular school setting is that there is a larger amount of kids that are coming out of a homeschool environment. So he instead of being like at various activities in which he might be one of the only homeschool kids, at the school there's a lot of folks that are coming out of that. There's a lot of kids that didn't know about Christmas, and not that all there was Kwanzaa, you know, and all of that kind of stuff, right? So
there was another anthem that wasn't the national Black anthem. What?
Yeah, one no Black anthem was right. Because he had never
the Pledge of Allegiance, yes.
Right, yeah,
we had to break that one down. So they were like a step for law. What are they doing? Like,
right, yeah. I remember when he noticed Santa Claus all you know, puffed up on the street. He said, "Who is that?" I said, "That ain't nobody. You don't need to say it." Right. Yeah. So all of that. So yeah, it is quite a that I feel you, because I'm in you know, our kids are around the same age, but it was helpful to watch other parents do some things. I remember a family of 4 kids, and 2 of the kids were homeschooled and 2 were not. And the 2 that were homeschooled coincidentally or on purpose, it wasn't coincidentally, are the same 2 kids that their father's from Kenya, was sent to Kenya to go to school for a year because the mom understood what they needed, you know, like was able to make some things that was feeding those children. So that those needed to go to Africa to a schooling situation there. And they needed to be homeschooled or village school, and did not use a curriculum, really focused in on their social, emotional, and psychological health.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I so appreciate our time together, and I'm so looking forward to more of these conversations. And I'm even thinking beyond the part 1 and 2 and 3 series, like where we can just really get into some other nuts and bolts, you know, of the juicy stuff. Yeah. So I will say thank you, and I wish you all a beautiful, in some places, liquid sunshiny day. And then if not, then have a wonderful sunny day. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Like.